Welcome aboard, YouTubers. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon, YouTubers. We are rounding out this third book in the series, Spirit Flyer series. I wish there was more people listening. I would hope that someday more people will listen and learn. Hear and listen, people. Listen and hear. Alright, so Daniel Bailey seen a glimpse of the king, the waiting king, in the distance, but only for an instant. That's when the light shone so brightly in the boy's heart that he knew what he must do. He had known all along. Okay. Oh, weird. Okay. Strange. Oh, this is a Gray Matters. Can't quite see that. Gray Matters. Are you using your brains? Are you using your brains or not brains? Are you using your brains and not the mainstream media brains? Are you using your brains and not science's brains? Are you using your brains and not NASA's brains? Are you using your brains, your own brains, instead of your high school teacher's brains, your high school physics teacher brains, or your college professor's brains? Use your own brains. Gray Matters. I love the statement. I'll try to get it right here, by Robert Heinlein. He's a science fiction writer. And he said, most people can't think. The few that can think don't do it very well. Extremely few people who think consistently, in a disciplined manner, on a regular basis, and without self-delusion, these in the long run are the only people that matter, because they can see the future, they can change the future. I know someone here who thinks he's very intelligent, but he cannot think without self-delusion. Anything he says is true, therefore he has to argue. He'll verbally argue with you till the stupidest points, the silliest points, I'll say, and incorrectly, no logic, no reason, just argue just to prove a point. And just, if you keep talking long enough, you can prove your point. Is basically how it goes. I grew up, I didn't grow up, my wife grew up in a family like that. The father was always right. He never would allow anybody to be wrong, anyone else to be right. And what it come down to is whoever could yell the loudest and scream the loudest and get the most frightening, bull guerrilla tactic of ripping up the vegetation and throwing it up in the air. And I watched her brother do that. He did that literally in a doorway, and it was scary because he was ready to kill. And when a man acts like a bull ape, he's aping a bull ape. He's acting like a bull ape. He's trying to threaten. He's trying to intimidate. It's an intimidation tactic, I'm bigger than you. I'm better than you. I don't have any back down in me. I'm not going to back down. I don't do anything. I will not give in. I will not give in. I'm the bull in the china cabinet. I am the bull ape, and I'll scare the heck out of you. I'll bare my fangs. I'll scream. I'll yell. I'll bluster. I'll fluster. I'll threaten you with destruction and death, and you better back down, because I'm not going to back down. So when you're doing that, you're giving in to the enemy, pure and simple. All right. Count down to 0. Daniel stared at the crowd. The silence became uncomfortable as everyone waited for him to say something. I can't accept this award, he had said abruptly into the microphone. We didn't win it fair. There was cheating on our team with some of the Wildcats players too. They were paid off, so I can't accept this. I'm sorry. Daniel gave the trophy and the certificates to a stunned Coach Carruthers. Suddenly a great weight lifted off his shoulders and head. At the bottom of his short right leg he felt something, as if a tense muscle had relaxed. The crowd was silent. Then people began to whisper and talk. Some began to boo. Cheater, somebody yelled out. Barry Smith stood up and yelled, Liar! His eyes were full of fear. Coach Carruthers was totally unprepared for Daniel's brief announcement. He grabbed Daniel by the shoulder. What did you say, young man? Liar, Barry shouted. He stood and pointed at Daniel. He's trying to ruin everything. He was the one who put soap into the town pool. He told me. Now he's trying to get us all in trouble. He even cheated in the point system so he could be number one. He's nothing but a troublemaker. He was rank blank from the beginning, and he'll always be a rank blank. He's just trying to cheat us honest boys and girls out of the rank we deserve. Yeah, the other boys on the rocket shouted out. That's not true, Daniel said with surprise. He suddenly felt hot and afraid, a blush creeping over his freckled face. I'm not trying to cheat anyone out of anything. I'm trying to be honest. Get him, Barry yelled. He threw a wad of paper at Daniel that hit him in the chest. Get him, someone yelled out. He's a point robber, a fake. Then suddenly the whole crowd seemed to go wild, as if something dark and powerful had been unleashed. It was as if all the fear about jobs, the big board, the point system, and a million dark secrets all came to the surface. People came out of the bleachers, confused and angry. When Daniel saw them coming toward the platform and saw the looks on their eyes, he felt a wave of panic. Daniel pushed his way through the gathering crowd on the platform. The boys on the rockets were on their feet coming toward him. They had blocked a set of steps down by the front, so Daniel pushed his way to the back of the platform. The other boys ran after him. Daniel jumped. He tried to hit the ground and start running all at the same time, but he slipped and fell. A sharp pain shot through his right leg. Get the rank blank, the boy shouted. Okay, he pushed his way to the back of the platform. The boys ran after him. Daniel jumped. He tried to hit the ground and start running all at the same time, but he slipped and fell. A sharp pain shot through his right leg. I'm not sure if he jumped off the platform or he's still on the platform. Daniel rubbed his leg as he sat in the wet grass and dirt. Okay, he's off the platform. He's on the ground. The boys grinned as they moved toward him. They knew he couldn't run away. Daniel wanted to cry out for help, but his cries would have been lost in the growing noise and from all the confusion. He could see the adults gathering on the platform. They were too busy arguing to look at Daniel. The president of the Cobra Club held his fake gold superstar trophy, tapping it slowly in his hand like a club. Daniel had never seen such a wild look in Barry's eyes. You're nothing but a rank blank spoiler, Barry spat out at Daniel. Daniel got up and shuffled backward while the boys advanced. The fear inside only kept growing as he saw the hate in their eyes. He was about to turn and run when he backed into something hard. He spun around and came face to face with his own dark reflection in the big board. Now the big board is now at ground level. I don't get this. I think there's kind of a little glitch in our storyline here. Only the face shining out was laughing. A long dark chain was wrapped around its neck. Daniel stared horrified as he saw the hands in the reflection yank on the chain. At that instant, Daniel was slammed up against the darkness of the big board. Barry's eyes gleamed with hatred. Daniel struggled to free himself, but his legs wouldn't move. He couldn't even see the adults anymore. The darkness grew. It seemed some of the lights had been turned off. Barry looked over his shoulder to see what the adults were doing. Then he looked back at Daniel and smiled. Daniel struggled wildly once more, but the boys all stepped closer. They spread out in a half circle, one going to the right end of the big board and the other boys closing on the left. Now there was no escape. Let me go, Daniel murmured almost in a cry. He felt ashamed of his fear, knowing the other boys could see him. But just then he felt inward as the big board suddenly released its grip. The other boys laughed to see Daniel lying in the dirt. Look at the crippled boy fell down, Barry said. The other boys howled. He needs his mommy, Alvin shouted. The little boy fall down, go wah wah. Daniel got to his knees. He looked at the faces of his team members. Barry was quiet. He ran his hand through his hair. Barry started to run toward the left. Daniel started to run toward the left, hoping to break through the line of boys, but before he could take 2 steps, he was pulled back as if a leaf were attached to the back of his neck. His feet flipped out from under him. The boys all howled with laughter again to see Daniel fall. Not so fast, superstar, that his reflection said. I want you to see this. And in a flash, the big board came to life in a sputter of electricity and purple lights. Then across the top, the familiar letters formed across the top of the dark panel. The point system. Daniel stared fearfully at the words. In the shadow of the ominous big board, the boys circled around Daniel. They looked up at the flashing lights and smiled. They can't see me, Daniel's reflection said and smiled. But I can see them. I want to watch the whole fight where they rip you apart, piece by piece, point by point. The big board hummed into activity. Then the words appeared. Daniel Bailey, countdown to rank blank, 1,003 points. A countdown, Barry yelled, reading the words. Mrs. Happy told me about this last week. That's great, you just say it. What do you mean? Alvin asked with interest. You can make him a 0, Barry said. Watch the big board as I talk. Daniel Bailey is a crippled rank blank snitch. At the instant he spoke the words, the point total began to subtract, losing 10 points. Daniel felt Barry's words hit like punches. The other boys looked at Daniel eagerly and then looked back at the point total. Daniel Bailey is a red-headed superstar spoiler, Barry yelled out. The point total on the board dropped more. Daniel again tensed up as each word hit him like a stone. His reflection in the big board cackled in laughter. They'll never accept you, the big reflection laughed. I told you to keep quiet. You could have been up with the rest of them, but no, you're a spoiler. Daniel Bailey is a lying squealer, Alvin shouted out, and a tattletale. Once again, the words hit Daniel, and the points dropped on the big board. Daniel felt weak from the blows. That was when he looked down. His eyes opened wide in surprise when he saw ghostly snakes biting down on his chest, legs, and arms. What was even more surprising were the watery names written on the backs of the leech-like serpents. One said Squealer, another had the name Tattletale, another said Spoiler. One attached to his shorter right leg said Crippled. They were the very names the boys had used to insult Daniel. He was still looking down at the attached serpents when another boy shouted out, "He's a gimpy, limpy, lying simpy," the boy yelled. At the same time the boy spoke, 4 more of the ghost-like snakes popped into view. Gimpy, limpy, lying simpy. With an almost silent hiss, they bit down on Daniel's body as each word was said. Names were written on each snake. The gimpy and the limpy snakes on Daniel's right leg were next to the other snake. The bites burned as if they were filled with poison, and then Daniel realized the snakes were filled with poison, only poison of a different kind. These snakes were filled with poison of hatred and fear and blind ignorance that came out of the boys who spoke them into existence. The point total on the big board subtracted again as the words were spoken. And this is really true. This is actually physically, scientifically happens in your body. When someone's yelling at you and they're speaking evil words to you, your body dumps a concoction of acidic, corrosive toxins into your system. Cortisol. It's like a cocktail of nasty, poisonous stuff, and it's destructive to your organs. So don't accept stuff. Don't receive things like that. When someone calls you a liar, don't accept it. And I had a lady did this recently. She was in an accident, and she said some guy told her. He said this is 20 years ago or 30 years ago. I don't know, a long time ago. And the man said, "Well, you're going to know when the weather changes. Now you'll feel it in your bones." She said, I do not receive that in the name of Jesus Christ." And she refused it. She never has had a problem with feeling pain or feeling a change in the weather. So sometimes that's a good thing, but whatever. She didn't want to do it, so she didn't accept it. She did not receive it. So you don't receive it. Just hold a mirror up with the Word of God and say, "No, I don't receive that." I need to learn to do that. See how Rexbury asked, looking at the faces of the other boys, "You just keep calling him names and his point total will drop, and when he reaches absolute zero, we'll get him." A shout rose up among the boys. All at once they all began yelling out at Daniel like a crowd of fans at a boxing match. Only they were yelling things much worse. The names came so fast and loud that Daniel fell to his knees and the writhing word snakes began to cover him. Soon the names turned to curses and the worst sort of words the boys could imagine. The snakes feasted on Daniel. He could actually see the ghostly snakes shooting out of the mouths of his accusers as they spoke. He could actually see the ghostly snakes shooting out of the mouths of his accusers as they spoke. A dark smoke-like fog was also pouring out of the mouths of many of the yelling boys. Some boys were even spitting and drooling as they shouted. The lights on the big board flashed more brightly as Daniel's point total dropped closer to zero. Daniel felt himself growing weaker and weaker, smaller and smaller, as if he were on the verge of disappearing altogether under the crush of snakes filled with venomous hatred. Their bodies seemed to be covering him as they gathered to feast. And you don't speak evil against someone, to someone, or about someone, behind their back or in front of them. I don't care. You don't speak evil about someone unless you hate them. And that's what he's experiencing here is hatred. And I've said, one woman, I said, "Look, your hatred is palpable. I can feel it. I don't hate you. I don't hate anybody." "Well, then why do you speak evil about me all the time? Behind my back, in front of my back, to my face, behind my, when nobody's around especially." But she'll say right to your face. And I said, I could take a knife and cut a slice of hatred and feed it to you. That's how real and how palpable it is. I can feel it. So, they're snakes. They're poisonous snakes. And I don't want to accept that. The lights on the big board flashed more brightly as Daniel's point total dropped closer to zero. Daniel felt himself growing weaker and weaker, smaller and smaller, as if he were on the verge of disappearing altogether under the crush of snakes filled with venomous hatred. Their bodies seemed to be covering him as they gathered to feast. He could no longer hear any of the words. He only felt them piling on, feasting on his own fear and shame. And the weaker he got, the more ashamed and afraid he felt. He felt worthless and useless, as if he deserved to be taken over by his enemies. The point total had subtracted all the way below 100 and was dropping fast, the digits flashing by. As Daniel saw the score rapidly falling, his own hope was disappearing. The boy shouted out in approval as the score fell below 50, then 30, then 20. And as it fell to 10, they began to count down to nothingness. Daniel's last hope was a wish and a questioning plea to the three kings. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. Their shout ripped through the sky. Bells and buzzers blasted out of the big board as the new words appeared, flashing on and off. Daniel Bailey, the biggest nothing in town, absolute zero and rank blank. Then all at once the big board began to fill up with words describing Daniel, with all the names and curses and shrieks the boys had shouted. The dark panel was so quickly filled with words that they became a garbled nonsense collection of words on top of letters. Daniel was lying on the ground in a heap, holding his hands over his head. He wept in shame before the shadow of the big board. He's absolute zero now, Barry announced, holding up his superstar trophy. Let's get the rank blank and finish him off. The mob of boys surged forward in a frenzied shout, but at that moment a light came on. In a flash brighter than lightning, two beams of light cut the deepening darkness around the big board. And with that light came a crashing sound of music more lovely than any morning sunrise. All at once the angry mob of boys fell in a heap to the ground, crushed under by the glory passing over them, the glory that could only come from the gaze of the king. Next chapter. I'm not going to read it. Sorry. Chapter 21. What really counts? Chapter 22 is Mrs. Happy's complaint. And chapter 23 is Royal Riders. Into the story. So there's 21, 22, 23. Three more. Let's see, I think I showed you the... show you the picture with him covered with snakes. So here's next chapter is John and Susan Kramer come riding in on their spirit flyers, and he's got this goo sticking, this tar-like, stinky, smelly goo sticking to him, and his knee coming off his kneecap. Okay. Good night. Sleep tight. Are they aboard?